Hello, everybody. How you doing? Here we are. We're live. Travis and I,
Hello.
basically following up. Hi, Travis. Basically following up on the couple previous videos from yesterday and the one that just aired earlier, about an hour and a half ago or so, I think it is. Anyway, so we were talking about free speech. We're talking about many kind of aspects of that. Um, you know, and for me, it's a concern. You know, Travis seems pretty confident in the fact that nothing can happen to our free speech, right? And he may be right, but I am concerned that people may have once felt the same way about AEDPA, or well, that people may have once felt the same way about habeas rights, and maybe thought those were untouchable, and there was no way that that could ever change, but then it did. So I don't know. For me, it's a why not just watch out and be careful anyway, kind of thing. So, but that's my main concern about this. Really, there's a lot of things going on out there in the world right now, a lot of contention, um, and for me, it's important that everybody stays civilized because it's only through the discourse and conversation and those sort of things, even though it's unpleasant, especially when we're dealing with things we don't like to deal with. Uh, but it's important to do because otherwise, leaving it unredressed leaves it for uh, it leaves it for other people to pick up the ball and run with, right? People who maybe don't have everybody's best interest at heart, that sort of stuff. Anyway, what's up, Trav?
Hey, how's it going? Was wasn't feeling well when we did that. I kind of noticed watching the last two nights.
Oh,
I was pretty uncomfortable, but and I think the medicine got to my head. I couldn't think at all, except when I was talking about Supreme Court cases, and I guess those are just ingrained in my head. But
right.
I couldn't put two words together. I apologize for that, but
No worries. I had a comment from somebody who just loves you. They said they could just listen to you talk for hours.
oh, they must have a pretty boring life. But thank you, whoever said that. I can't see the chat because I'm on my phone tonight, and
Right.
so I just have you up. So I'll have to. So hello, everybody. I'm not ignoring you. I'm relying on Erekose to filter through the chat and whatnot. But whoever said that, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, Truth Monster. He's out there. The comment I'm talking about came on a comment on, I think it was from yesterday's video. Anyway, but what's up, Jamie? How's it going, buddy?
Hey, Jamie.
He's asking if you will come back to Discord as well. Can we get you back on Discord, dude, or what? What's up, T1? On break? All right.
I'm too old to Discord.
Oh, jeez.
I popped in the other day on someone else's channel just so I could vote on a book for reading club, but I'm really not.
It's reporting live from my sofa over there.
Yeah.
So he still pops up in this private chat, and that's how I was able to see he's still in there. He's
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I hadn't been in there in months and months, but was still in there. And
yeah, because that's a private chat, like separate from the servers. So it's like a
what the heck is this?
Well, we may be continuing discussion of this in Discord after this video. So if you're interested, let us know. We're gonna, in a voice chat in there, and whatever. So, or at least we may be doing that anyway. So, anyway, all right. So what we're talking about is, again, we're talking about the subject of free speech. We're also talking about Andy Colburn, obviously, because it's important to point out that as much as he's crying foul, about all this, that's happened because of the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, and he's crying foul, but the fact is he is a public figure. He is subject to scrutiny, and so, and his own statements make him suspect. So he has numerous problems, and he can try to protest the fact that he's never had his integrity questioned. Well, guess what? Now it is questioned. Okay, it may not have been before, but it is now. So get over it. You know, and to take that a step further, or at least to warn against going overboard. It's, I think, important because I could tell by the questions I was getting asked at rally. I can tell by the certain tack that some people who believe Stephen and Brendan are guilty take, that they intend to be, to hold it very much against supporters for going to the personal level, where, like, Andy Colburn talks about receiving death threats on his family and himself and that sort of thing. Obviously your right to free speech is probably going to give you the right to do that, but I think that in exercising free speech, there's a certain amount of responsibility that goes along with it, and I think those things are over the line. And I think the people who disagree with supporters, or who don't believe Stephen and Brendan are innocent, are likely to use that as something to make supporters look bad. So once again, I encourage everybody to think about what you're doing. Obviously support, obviously create awareness, obviously talk about Stephen and Brennan and all that, and to the nines and everything. But just think about it, because you don't want to be the one going too far, and stepping over those lines, and being a bad human, essentially. I know I can't control everybody, and I know I'm not, just because I say it doesn't, mean anything. But those of you who think I'm talking sense, try to spread the word, and try to help other people understand why it's important to be under.
Yeah, so let's bring up a couple of real life examples. So the John Benet Ramsey case, and her father, Mr. Ramsey, I can't remember his first name right now.
John.
John was extremely aggressive against magazines, newspapers, so on and so forth, that, when they did step over the line, he had a super power First Amendment defamation law firm go after those folks. And here's why this is important. I'll tell you in a second. So then, there was some speculation as to his son's involvement. Burke, correct? Burke Benet Ramsey.
Burke Ramsey.
And so when people there was not a documentary, like a television show, and these, investigators got on there and they said, oh, it's my person's Burke. Well, I mean, he sued ABC and CBS and recovered millions, just thinking maybe they would, he'd moved back to Georgia. They moved away from Boulder, and they thought, well, maybe he'll just, ignore all this. But they didn't filter what these people were saying, and they got sued, and he won. But here's the key. There was, and not social media platform it was, but there was a host. I don't know if it was YouTube or, what it was, but he went after a social media host, like a YouTube channel host, because they just went way over the line on Burke, and they prevailed on that. So, what is the First Amendment protect. It protects you from,
That's from the government.
well, yeah, that's true, but it's also protects opinion and exchange of ideas and freedom of thought. So you can state an opinion about some things and whatnot, but you say opinion about anything. But as soon as you start to state fact, this person is a thief, this person stole funds, this person misappropriated funds, this person did that, and you're stating fact, and it meets the categories of liable per se, loathsome disease. You accuse somebody of having a venereal disease. There's certain categories, if you state this stuff as fact, you can be sued. And, so while the government cannot criminalize it and the government can't go after you, the individual who is the brunt of, your vent or whatnot, there is a limit to free speech. You can't say anything you want. You can, be subject to defamation suits if you go over the line. And that, in fact, happened with John and Burke Ramsey, because people thought, they were just underground and weren't going to pop up, but they're just saying all these crazy things about him, including on network TV and national magazines, and he went after them. And my recollection is that he prevailed on all of the suits, and the last one was Burke's lawsuit against a social media platform. Now, obviously, most people that run a social media platform, they're really not going to be any hopes of a monetary recovery, and I don't think he was expecting any, but he got a consent order out of YouTube platform host to, cease and desist the statements that were clearly defamatory, and people have the right to state their opinion and their conclusions and whatnot, but you start to get personal and go over the line, there's potential personal liability.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then, so Colburn has sued documentarians, which, they're part of the press under the First Amendment. And something the Supreme Court has struggled with over the years is balancing the freedom of the press with freedom of speech. So for example, if you're a public figure or a public official, you're subject to more criticism and scrutiny than a private individual is, because
Right.
if it wasn't that way, newspapers would be afraid to say, this politician's a bum, this candidate's a bum, and they don't want to chill the free press, because that's also vital. That's the fourth estate in the UK, and we brought it over, and the founders were well aware of that you had to have a free press to have experiments succeed. And so they're constantly balancing this. And the most recent famous decision was the decision that removed any limits on PACs, how much PACs could contribute to a campaign. They removed the limits. They also removed the limits on what individuals could give. So now you see these wealthy individuals donating millions, contributing millions and millions of dollars to particular campaigns or PACs. And the Supreme Court did that under the guise of First Amendment. And they said that companies, corporations are entitled to free speech. When you limit the amount that a corporation can give to 10,000 or that an individual can give to a particular candidate, you're stifling free speech. So these issues can blend, and they're in constant tension with one another, and
Can I
they
just say I don't
do.
agree with that at all? Jeez. I'm worried the corporations are running things too much already. But anyways.
Well, so that was a very controversial situation. It was in the cycle affecting the primaries with, it's a case. Anybody can go read it, but there was a lot of fear that, if people like Nathan Adelson can give millions and millions of dollars to one candidate, all of a sudden make them viable, that the rich and the wealthy can control the political system. And then on the other side was, well, you're inhibiting my right to free speech. You're inhibiting my right to launch an ad that says, to contribute millions of dollars to an ad that says a particular candidate is a bum. And so, it was a 5-4 decision. It's very close, but people raised the First Amendment in a number of different contexts. But, it's absolutely fundamental that we have free speech, the right to assemble, the right to protest or demonstrate, whatever you want to call it, on the courthouse steps, literally, to call attention to a cause, to talk on a platform like this about what our thoughts are about particular elected officials, like particular governor of Wisconsin, for example, or an elected judge, for example.
Yeah.
And public commentary and debate is essential, but it's not unlimited. There's some that feel that it shouldn't be limited in any way whatsoever. That when Congress said, when the framers put in the what we know as the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and that the first session of Congress after the new nation was formed, after the articles of the articles were eliminated, and we adopted a new constitution. We got those 10 amendments, and it says clearly, Congress shall make no law, and then it goes on. Press, speech, not establish a religion, freedom of expression of religion, and there. It was very, very important back then. It's very, very, very important now. And William Penn inherited inherited from his father what is now known as Pennsylvania, and he converted to Quaker, and today that would be considered a cult. And he was basically run out of England, and finally said, "Well, I'll go to the land I inherited," and formed a colony. And big thing for him was religious freedom, but to a certain extent. He wasn't too keen on the Catholic Church, and he wasn't too keen on the Puritans, but these things were fought for, and they're deeply ingrained, and so that's why we have a written constitution with written amendments, and so we don't run into the same issues that the UK does, or the countries that were part of the Commonwealth, like Canada, New Zealand.
Right. So everybody's T1's going on about it. Andrew Colburn said he hulks out on nightstands. Anyways,
Okay, so yeah,
it's kind but anyways,
the Andy Colburn thing. So they're documentarians, so that's part of the press, and
right.
The defense moved it to federal court, which is their right to do, and because there's diversity of citizenship,
right.
But
That
he's
moved
going to
closer to Green Bay, right?
yeah,
Easier for
and
them
so
to get in.
they set a high bar if they can show either that he is a public official, which they've already raised. He's going to have to show actual malice, which is a very, very high bar. And then, even if he's not a public official, if they are making a legitimate public commentary criticism about a situation, they're going to be protected as well.
Right.
And so that's the trade-off. That's the tension between freedom of press and defamation. That if somebody lies about you to the extent where it's hurting your life and it's your reputation and so on and so forth, in most circumstances you could recover, except if you're a public figure, public official, or if it's they didn't do it with actual malice. And so that there's trade-offs that the Supreme has made, and those trade-offs are discussed in the cases that were mentioned in the brief and that we learn about right from the get-go in defamation cases. Gertz v. Welch and New York Times versus Sullivan. And it remains the law today that we think, yeah, people do run the risk, politicians and public figures do run the risk of being offended or hurt or whatnot, but they have voluntarily entered into the arena of public debate as opposed to a private citizen who
Right.
doesn't invite that type of thing upon themselves at all.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm hoping we can get some good discovery out of it, like what happened in the West Memphis 3 case and other cases.
It would be interesting. I mean, I gotta.
However, to follow up,
look, for me, I'm still wondering, dude, what's up, because I know Michael Griesbach didn't send the information about Andy getting the call in 95, 96, whatever and stuff. He didn't send that up to upstate when he originally did the little thing before Peg made her report about it. Like, they didn't send the stuff about Andy. Mike Griesbach and Rohrer held back that stuff about Andy and just sent like the rest. So it's like, why was he protecting him then? And then here we are now. He's Andy's lawyer in this. I don't know. For me, that's a little odd. Just because I know that he conveniently left out the stuff about Andy before.
I think the police association may be funding it. It's total speculation, but.
Well, I know Michael Griesbach started his own practice. He's, or joined another firm or started his own, I think, or whatever it was. But he stepped down from being Manitowoc County DA and started his own deal, or went to another firm, and then now here he is representing Andy.
Yeah, and there's political stuff behind that, and can be at that level, and so on and so forth. But it costs a lot of money to pursue those cases on a plaintiff, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I can't imagine Colburn's funding it, and it'd be very difficult for a new law firm to handle it. But If an association gets behind it and funds it in part or in full, then you can do a lot. But why I say that is teacher association and teacher unions, when a teacher gets unfairly blasted by a parent or a group, they start putting stuff out in the press. They're not public officials. The teachers are not. They're not, unless they interject themselves into it. And so you got to be careful what you say. You can't just be making all these factual assertions about a person or teacher. But anyway, the association will come in and fund the defamation lawsuit. And we call those slap suits, and they're basically just to shut these people up. You don't really expect to get a major monetary recovery. But, you and Allie have raised the point, and it goes back to your original premise on that, is that as part of the lawsuit we learned, or at least, it's claimed in an affidavit, or, in the complaint, that he's received all of these death threats, and his family has received threats, and just, vile comments that have, as you and Allie have stated very, very well, you just have no place. That kind of conduct.
It makes us look like the unreasonable opposition, folks. Just want you to know that. That's what it makes us look like when that stuff happens.
And, to call up somebody and threaten them or send a letter and make a threat, that is actionable. That is a crime, and you can be prosecuted. There's no free speech to communicate with somebody what we call in Texas a terroristic threat. Doesn't mean an act of terrorism. It's just, I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill your kids. You can be prosecuted for that. And then if you do it across state lines or through a wire, like a telephone or cell phone, then it's federal. That is criminal, and that type of speech isn't protected, nor should it be, to make physical threats against somebody or their family.
It really truly is in many ways. Because like I said, it doesn't make supporters of Stephen and Brendan look too good when that stuff's out there. It's just,
Which is completely different than saying, I'm going to participate in a peaceful demonstration at the courthouse steps, or I'm going to educate myself on a particular issue, case, whatever, and engage in discussion and discourse in a public format, whether it be semi-public format of Discord, the public format of YouTube, Twitter and Reddit, and all of the rest. That those are just worlds apart. It's equating the McVeigh, Oklahoma bombing to, freedom of speech, or the Ted Kaczynski Unabomber case. It's just completely different parts of the universe. It's not even in a First Amendment realm. And I want to make sure, we're clear on that. And
I hope you're
remind people, I've heard you and Allie, and I'm sure everyone else, but, I specifically remember you and Allie saying, when we learned that, or it was alleged in the suit papers in the Colburn case, that, that it just has no place, none.
So, um, yeah, the wrecking crew knows no threats, and that's good. It's like I said, it's it's a reason why I played that clip in the video yesterday, where you about allowing people to talk, okay, and letting them, you know, manifest. And what are the, by listening to people talk, you're gonna find out what they're about, and that's what that means, to manifest, right? So when we act, how do we want to be perceived, right? That's the, for me, the big takeaway. And I don't like guys like Andy Colburn being able to claim those things and, allege those things. But I do know that lots of people called Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department and did a lot of, and unfortunately the Manitowoc Police Department, because they didn't quite get it straight that they were mad at the Sheriff's Department, and they ended up calling the police department and gave the police department a bunch of grief, and they aren't even involved. So these are also other things to think about. Why not to go off half-cocked in exercising your right to free speech, to be under control, and above all else, try not to react with emotion. It's good to have emotion and it's good to have passion, but try not to react with it like raw. Take time to contemplate and think.
I don't know if Denise Rainey is on with her wrench, but she did a really good episode on her channel about Bob Dylan and Hurricane Carter and Hurricane Carter's case, and then Bob Dylan writing a song about it. Mm-hmm. And Bob Dylan started off the day after he met Hurricane Carter in person for the first time in prison. The next day, he kicked off a fundraising campaign, and he started it off with a $100,000 check. I don't know what that would be today, like 500,000, could be $1 million, but at least 500,000. He wrote a check, and then got other people, to pitch in. But he was writing the song, and Denise pointed out, and I'd forgotten, the record company asked him to change some lyrics to avoid defamation suit. They wanted him to remove Patty Diamond, but he said, "Nah, I'm not going to do that. That name is just too classic." And then she filed a defamation lawsuit, but it went nowhere. Got dismissed. And so I believe in everybody's rights. Yeah, you can make the allegation, the counter. What balances that anybody can sue anybody in court. What balances that out is you got to prove it. And then on the civil side, we have these different steps: motion to dismiss, a motion for summary judgment, that filter out the frivolous. And that pendulum swings back and forth. The court can make it easier to survive a motion for summary judgment so that you can get to a jury, or they can make it more difficult. For example, the Eagle Nation case was thrown out on summary judgment, which was based on the Civil Rights Act, the 1983 action is what we call it. And so they had to jump over this huge high bar to get it to a jury, and the district judge said no. I'm going to rule in favor of the government, the city, county, whatever. And then it went to the Seventh Circuit, your favorite court, and they affirmed it. And
there's 3 judges there that I think are pretty spectacular, I'll tell you. Anyway.
But no, I don't begrudge anybody to file the suit. Maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, and that's the business we're in. It's
Right.
lawsuits and defending them, whether it's in criminal court or civil court. But when you're defending somebody, whether it's a person in a criminal case or a person in a civil case or corporation, you have, when you're defending them, you have the right to insist on all of these things, and so it'll play out. But like I say, even if it survives the motion to dismiss and it doesn't get tossed out right from the beginning, as Jerry Buting pointed out back in December when it was first filed, that this could be the biggest Christmas present that Stephen has ever gotten, depending on what they get out of the discovery. But it may not even go that far. It may get tossed out at the at the motion to dismiss
But
level.
it'd be nice if they get past that, because then, Myra and Laura can bring their lawyers, and they can bring in a little cabinet in there and say, "Now, Andy, can you please explain to us how this happened?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you watch the West Memphis 3, it's a 3-part episode. Part 3, they included portions of the deposition transcript of Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of one of the victims, who then became the key suspect after his follicle of hair was found in a knot that had hog-tied one of the victims, and they were able to get DNA off of the root of that, and it came back to Terry Hobbs. And but they went into with everything on him. What enemies did he have? What was his history of violence? And there was a clear history of spousal abuse and so on and so forth. And it wasn't long after that he just dismissed the lawsuit.
It's interesting. Hopefully, well, whatever happens, it's interesting. I mean, it seems to me that everybody's pretty confident in the fact that they feel Andy was pretty foolish to even bring it. I mean, Zellner seemed to give that kind of impression when she heard about it, and I don't know. What do you think about that? Is it?
Because it was incredibly foolish for Terry Hobbs to file it. He all it did was benefit the 3 defendants, the 3 boys in jail. Now, now men. All it did was help them, which, it's why Jerry tweeted what he tweeted. And so foolish to file. If it's on his dime, he's incredibly foolish.
I see.
If the association's funding it, you say, hey, they would have to have his permission. They can't just file a lawsuit. But, hey, Andrew, this is really affecting all of us as law enforcement, and, we're willing to fund this. But, I don't know if that's the case or not, but I have seen that. I've seen that numerous times where an association has been willing to fund a case.
Right. Right on. That's interesting.
So we're still waiting for a ruling from the court on the motion to dismiss.
Yeah.
Based on
Tracy says we should most likely be seeing a motion from Zellner with the Court of Appeals here soon. A week ago, she said within the next couple of weeks. So I would say within the next week, she's thinking, but maybe a little longer. But she's anticipating KZ filing with the Court of Appeals to tell Judge Sigwitz, hey, listen, due date. Right?
Yeah, I saw that. And I've said when asked and, different things that I expected her to file that motion, and I agree in that assessment. As to the time frame, Zellner's got her own timetable, and whatever it is, it works for her. So I'm not sure, but so people wonder, well, Zellner came right out and accused Colburn of what an opinion. She came right out and said Colburn drove the vehicle onto the property with another person, followed by a white car, and then she's, what's the right word, right adjective? She's raised any suspects in the form of Ryan. She didn't mention by name, she just called him, but in the later developments, then also brought in Scott and Bobby. And then people have asked at times, and it's a good question, well, how is it she can say something like that? And then the reason is there's a legislative privilege. Legislators on the floor are privileged. They can say anything without fear of being sued for defamation. And attorneys in court pleadings and paperwork and in court pleadings and at trial or oral argument have a privilege. However, we're constrained by the rules of ethics. We can't call the other attorney a bad name. We can't call the judge a bad name. So we don't have unlimited free speech, but we're protected against defamation. And the reason for that is we shouldn't fear being prosecuted or sued for making an argument in vigorous debate. The way you address that is say, well, Your Honor, I'd like to see what counsel's basis for that statement is. I'm unaware of any evidence or any facts that would support X, Y, and Z. And, so the way you address an unsupported accusation is to, call them out on it, which is what should happen. My viewpoint in terms of discord and what you're doing here and whatnot is, I don't think what either of us is saying is, no, you need to probe, you need to get behind the facts, whoever it is. Mm-hmm. And, you don't make threats against an individual. You do listen to both sides, but the flip side of that is if someone says, and I'll throw out an example, Teresa Halbach's still alive. Yeah, we don't insult that person. Say, okay, yeah, we've heard that and we're familiar with the argument. Are you aware of anything new? Do you have anything additional to add to the discussion based on, what's been brought up before? Is there anything additional that you have? And I've seen you handle it respectfully. So yeah, we're aware of that theory and we're aware of that argument. And you've indicated that you're one of the people that believe that theory. But we're talking about something else tonight. So, right. We don't need to go on and on about it. And you do it in a respectful way. And I'm laughing merely because at the time I thought I would have handled it a different way, but we won't get into that. So, no, and if somebody's talking about a particular issue or a particular theory, there's nothing wrong in a respectful way of saying or asking, well, what's your basis for that? What is that from the trial testimony? Is that from, an affidavit of one of Zellner's experts? Or, where are you getting that? How are you connecting the dots? There's nothing wrong with asking probing questions. That's what I would expect anybody in the wrecking crew to do. I mean, that's what they do. I've seen it over and over and over again.
In fact, somebody asked a question right now. But go ahead and finish.
But for me on that issue, it's easy. I don't need to get into, is she alive or dead? Legally, she is dead, period, end of story. Just like Brandon's confession was, although I disagree with the decision, is legally not coerced. His confessions are.
Oh, did you see the tweet from Drizzen today, though?
No, what did Drizzen say?
He tweeted about a case somewhere not in, I don't think it was in Wisconsin, but the cops had told the suspect, the truth shall set you free, and the judge threw out the confession based on that.
I don't, so that decision would have to be retroactive, and they're typically not.
Well, I'm not saying it's going to apply to Brendan, but he's pointing out that somewhere else out there in the world, a judge saw those words and said, yeah, that's not acceptable. He's just pointing it out,
Yeah, well, there is no doubt that Brendan's situation, his case, there are 1,000 Brendans in the United States.
Probably more.
You're or more, and you're well aware of that. I'm talking about juveniles, coerced confession, but he brought so much light to it. Unfortunately, couldn't get the Supreme Court to take the case. I think you've heard Laura speak on this, so you could speak to it better than I, but some stuff I've heard her say is that, yeah, it's a major disappointment, but it's one more step to get the high court to listen to these arguments and allow the case to proceed with briefing and be argued. And there's no doubt that it's had an effect on many, many states. I think that they have more and more states are seeing the light about that form of interrogation with somebody of, either young age or limited social intellectual ability, or both, that it just keeps coming up over and over and over again. Okay, we know for a fact this was a false confession. What are the factors in common here? And it keeps, juvenile defendant, easily, susceptible to suggestibility, on and on and on. It's the same. It's just the same bad movie rerun over and over and over again.
Right. A diagnosed or even undiagnosed SLP problem,
Yeah.
That was such an interesting paper recently for Brendan, by the way. It was one of the law professors at the Wisconsin University of Wisconsin School of Law, and then a speech language pathologist. And they got together and they did what they called that under the hood look at Brendan's confession. I don't know. You heard about that, right?
I've heard you talk about it. It's not one of the things that I went and looked at, but I will.
I'll have to send
You know,
you a link for it. It's brilliant. Oh, it was so good. I mean, they really get in there. I mean, they're and like when they break down like how they should have been asking questions that were open ended and whatever, but it turns out that pretty much 80% of the questions they ask were either yes or no questions, in which they have to give you a great deal of content in order for you to be able to ask or answer yes or no, or multiple choice, or whatever. Basically, the type of questions that they have to give a bunch of information in the process of asking the question, right? So, and that's kind of not the way it's supposed to be. You're allowed to ask some of those questions, but they're not supposed to be the majority. The majority of questions are supposed to be open-ended so that you're not, passing information that corrupts the confession. Anyway.
well, no, when I was watching MAM1,
And I forgot to ask. I'm sorry. I forgot to ask KW's question.
you start to see the stuff about the confession and whatnot, and then of course MAM2, but MAM1, I'm just like, man, this is deja vu all over again with West Memphis 3. And anybody who knows much about the West Memphis 3 at all, Jesse Miskelly and Brendan, I mean, the parallels are striking. And then, as you're aware, with these other juvenile false confession cases, it's just a repeat over and over and over again that, yeah, you can get a juvenile, especially one who's limited in some way, to confess to anything if they've got a project due in 5th period or whatever it was.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. So KW asked Travis, your opinion, what are the chances that they will get to the depositions with Colburn?
Okay, so another way,
They're wondering what you think.
What are the chances that they're going to win, but that the producers and Netflix are both going to get out on the motion to dismiss. That's a really difficult motion to have granted at that level, but I wasn't aware of all of these problems that they had in serving the complaint timely. And there are many, many cases where the court said, hey, we're sorry, it's these rules on when you have to file the lawsuit. They filed it the day before the statute of limitations expired. That's another telling thing about how late it was filed. Then you have so many days to serve it. And if you don't get it served, there are tons of cases that say, we're sorry, too bad. It looks by all appearances that you have a very legitimate case and that you were a victim of some sort of injustice by the other side. But these rules are not flexible. They're not guidelines. They are procedural rules. And sometimes they'll even say, your recourse is against your lawyer who didn't serve it in time. And so it's very, very difficult to answer that question because all we're looking at is the affidavits of who served it. It's going to be up to federal court judge to weigh or a magistrate to weigh those affidavits and decide. If it comes down to a tie, they tend to lean in favor of letting the plaintiff proceed forward. But best I can put on it is 50-50.
Yeah.
50-50 that the judge is going to grant the motion. If he grants the motion to dismiss, there won't be any discovery. It'll be over.
Right.
If he denies the motion to dismiss, then some sort of discovery will proceed forward.
Right. Okay.
That's the best I can put on it. I'm sorry it's not any better than that.
All right, let's see here. Warm up. Let's see. Haven't gotten around to commenting on the free speech premieres yet, but as an Aussie, I enjoyed hearing about U.S. law. Info.
As a what?
Sorry.
As a what?
As an Aussie. From Australia.
Oh, gee.
From Australia.
Oh, good Lord.
As all my videos about Scott Davis get blocked there, right? Anyway.
Oh man. Well, they have hate speech laws in
Hey,
Australia.
I don't hate Megan Bruton. I don't, hey, I don't hate her, but I'm gonna, just like Andy Colburn, I'm gonna call her out on her BS, right?
Yeah.
So nothing personal. Brother. But
Can you ask? Well, can I ask? When anybody watched the first premiere, you get an ad. I know the ads change based on the person that's the individual subscriber, but all I'm getting ads for is survivalist food, patriot food. That's the ad I get.
I get the Patriot. I always get the little Patriot like solar cell for recharging your phone.
Oh, I got that for a time, and then I got now it Patriot Food. Not interested. Sorry, hit tag somebody else. And then I got a message. It said, "Viewer discretion. Some viewers may find this program offensive." And then when I went back and tried to say, what the hell? That can't possibly be. But it just kept feeding me right into the program. There was no early message. I'm just wondering, did anyone else get that warning? Viewer discretion advised. May some viewers may consider this program to be offensive. Did anyone else see a message like that? We'll see.
I'll tell you what. That video, the first one yesterday, was immediately demonetized by YouTube.
I try to analogize to be helpful and draw by example, but I'm sure it's the words I use, like anti-Semitism, Holocaust. Even though I would use those terms in a positive way, I bet they're instant red flags or racial epithets, racial slur. I don't know what it is.
I've done things about free speech before. Yep, all of them. Yep, this one too. Demonetized immediately. It's not showing me the live yet, but I'm sure it will be demonetized as well. Anytime I've done anything about free speech or AEDPA, immediate demonetization.
We'll have to come up with our own code.
Well,
and we'll talk in code.
Well, there's a couple guys out there creating a platform specifically so that people can talk about the issues that YouTube and Twitter don't want to allow. So hopefully that platform will be up and running soon. But
well, I don't know. I'll reserve judgment on it.
What happens.
Sometimes, I won't participate in any platform that allows people to monetize, outright hate speech.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I just don't want
these two particular people I'm referring to would not be the type to tolerate hate speech. Just so you know.
Right.
So, I don't think that would be much. I think that they'd be on board with that.
Right.
So, but yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. I've been hearing talk that these two individuals are going to do something, so I'm waiting for something to flesh out before I actually
Yeah.
say anything. So, but yeah,
I mean, I'll defend to my last breath people's right to say or think whatever they want to say.
yeah. It's like
You
if
know,
I go through my last 12 videos, I'll put it this way: if I go through my last 12 videos, 7 are demonetized and 5 are monetized. That's what it's like lately. It's crazy.
wow. Or I wonder if it's because there's links to, particular individual. Even though you didn't show the video part, the audio, I wonder
Yeah.
if that gets it. Although
Yeah.
his
So
videos
arbitrary.
aren't demonetized, right? He's making money on YouTube, right?
Who? Jordan?
Uh, Peterson.
Jordan Peterson? He actually doesn't monetize on YouTube. But he has he has a Patreon account, and
Okay.
he actually that's where people that want to show their appreciation for him
Okay. Gotcha.
they become a patron of him,
Okay.
and
Gotcha.
so that's he doesn't bother monetizing. But
Okay.
this other guy, Dave Rubin, who's a YouTuber, he has a little talk show and stuff, and he is monetizing, and he's experiencing the same thing that a lot of us are. See, the problem with this is like people hear me talk about demonetization on my channel. Don't get it mixed up. It's not about me getting paid, right? Let's not kid ourselves, right? Money makes the world go round, at least when it comes to corporations and stuff. Guess what YouTube doesn't want to do if they deem my video not suitable for ads? YouTube doesn't want to bother suggesting that video to anybody else. So it just automatically gets less views because YouTube has deemed it a bastard child, essentially. I mean, when it comes down to it, that's what they're doing.
Right.
They're singling it out and going, it's no good. And so it gets less views because they can't slap an ad on it. They don't want to bother sharing it with anybody else.
Right.
And that's what it comes
And
down
then
to.
it can go too far. Yeah, it could go too far. So let's take it out of this context that we're talking about. But let's say they're gonna, they're gonna demonetize anything that's pro this political candidate and continue to monetize the opponent. So then YouTube then becomes, what's the name for a trender? Then YouTube starts to be a trender in politics. And that's the last thing that we want from a platform that's supposed to be a free exchange of ideas. And, I'm all for, that they have limits on nudity and this and that. And, it not a platform for fringe groups on either side of the spectrum, whatever it is. But, within reasonable limits, but you start, I think what you're trying to say, if I understand it, it's a very legitimate point. If you start monetizing and demonetizing things that are in the public sphere right now, and let's just, let's take all of these other issues out of it. Let's just say it's a tax plan in Congress, and one side says, no, we don't agree that we should raise taxes from these people to fund this, and the other side has a different view. We don't need YouTube deciding, okay, we need to steer this debate over to. It's just like, now I'm getting ads from YouTube when I go on about that they're starting a music streaming service, like the other ones, and it's not right they're owned by Google, which basically owns the universe and all of the satellites and all of the, navigate. I mean, they own everything.
Mhm.
And, it's just not healthy to have one company, Google, controlling everything about us and how, when it gets to the point where they control how we think. You go back to the founders and you go back to the framers, they were deathly afraid of one person, i.e. King George, being able to tell you how to think. And then Quakers like William Penn, they wouldn't even remove their hat to the king. That's so they considered a cult, but they believed that all men were created equal under God. Does that sound familiar? That's the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, except Benjamin Franklin wanted Jefferson to change God to creator. But we're all equal under God or our creator or, whatever. And, that is a huge point. You don't want anybody, whether it's a king, a monarch, a dictator, or a giant corporation being able to tell you how to think, what to think. We're doomed if that happens. And I think that's been the point you've been trying to make over the last couple of episodes, last couple of premieres.
Yeah.
It's a vitally important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually do need to wrap up at this point. Got some messages coming in and I got to go deal with something. So I do hate to have to cut this off, but thank you for being here, Travis.
Well, thanks for having me. And sorry I wasn't feeling too good when we did that premiere on Sunday or, recorded it. I worked out at the ranch and overexerted myself.
Yeah. Well, it had some good information in it. Hey, and regardless of YouTube demonetizing it, it looks like my subscribers are responding to it because that video already has 665 views since yesterday, which isn't bad. So,
Well, I'm glad for whatever part I may have played in that, but as we mentioned in the first premiere, that issue is very near and dear to me. I've had many First Amendment cases, and even that one high-profile one about high school students participating in a brief march and being able to represent that young man and have a good outcome. It's one of my proudest moments as a lawyer, but it's one of my big issues. And then you hit certain things. Sometimes you're faced with tough questions, and I'll just say this one thing and let you spin out of it. But in Texas, you can adopt a section of highway and clear it of litter.
Right.
Adopt a highway.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, the Ku Klux Klan wanted to adopt a portion of highway, and the state of Texas Department of Transportation said, we're not going to let you do that. Now, check this out. So they sued, and who ended up representing them, it's, the polar opposites. The lawyers from the ACLU, who are targets of the Ku Klux Klan, they represented the Ku Klux Klan and said, no, that's an abridgment of freedom of speech, the right of assembly, freedom of association, many things. They said, you can't say, well, they can adopt a highway,
but they can't.
part of a highway, but the Ku Klux Klan cannot. Well, anyway, Texas Supreme Court said, no, we could draw the line with the Ku Klux Klan
Oh, okay. There you go.
because of their history, and but it got fully debated, it got fully discussed, it went through the process, and people weren't beaten, people weren't subjected to fire hoses, and there was civil discourse and a legal process. But so you start thinking about these tough issues, and you go, oh my gosh, well, what if the wrecking crew wanted to adopt part of a highway in Wisconsin? Shouldn't they be? Or I mean, seriously, I
get it. You're suggesting an idea which is actually interesting. Might actually be worth looking into.
Yeah, who decides? Who gets to
Would they
decide?
bar us? Would they?
No, you're in.
Right.
You're out.
Would be, yeah.
But I know you need to go, and thank you for having me.
That's
and
funny though. That's good. We'll have to think about that. Hey, Wrecking Crew, remember what he just said. We'll have to think about that one. Let's see if we get rejected by the state of Wisconsin to adopt a highway. Anyway, thank you for being here, Travis. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you for being out here, everybody. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys.